Hello, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman, and on this stream we build Django apps. And we're going to continue on one tonight. We're actually going to be working on integrating a Stripe hosted checkout flow for my homeschool application that I'm doing. So hope you can stick around and check out how that all goes. There's plenty of ways to keep in touch with me. If you want to contact me, ask me questions, do whatever. I've got all of those links above that you can see. There's also ways that you can help support me. So if you're able to do so and you enjoy my content, I encourage you to check out patreon.com. And patreon.com/mblehman is my account, and you can support me financially. I do want to thank my current patrons of Rupert, my new superhero tier patron Steve, and then Abdulaziz, Patrick, Eric, and Philip. Thank you so much for your contributions. As well, you can like and subscribe and comment and do all those things on YouTube. I'm happy to answer questions. I try to answer as many as possible. So if you're catching this later after the stream, the live stream on YouTube, please message me and let me know, and I'm happy to chat. Let's get into this Stripe hosted flow. I've been working on this for my project and I made the decision to use a hosted flow. And what do I mean by that? Stripe has a number of options in their checkout features. One is to integrate very deeply with their APIs and build a very custom flow. But my application has very conservative needs for subscriptions. Like, it's not very complex is what I'm trying to say. So there's not a lot that I need to do. And since there's not a lot of customization that I need to do at this point in time, I would like to do as little as I can. And to that end, Stripe offers a feature to basically make a custom page on their side that will handle a lot of the billing and subscription creation and all this sort of stuff, and allow me to make as little code change as I need to, and still get the benefit of charging people for a subscription. So I've been starting on this flow, and I've got the Stripe documentation page here in front of us. I've worked through some of these steps, and we're going to continue along that path tonight. That's the plan. So the first step in this, well, I guess a couple of steps that I've already knocked out, is I in my account created some test products and prices, or a product, a subscription product, and then a couple of different price tiers. So in my application, there's going to be two separate price tiers. One will be a monthly rate, and one will be an annual rate. And so those are represented in Stripe as two separate prices to the same product. And then I need to then use those and build them together into a session that will allow a user to fill in their checkout details, at which point it will create a customer, and it will integrate all of that into your application and be able to let you use their service and get all that good stuff. So I've got some code here to create a checkout session that is part of the sample code, and I've done this code in my Django application. We'll take a look maybe briefly at what this implementation ended up looking like, but really my focus tonight is going to be on the JavaScript or template stuff that's available. So let's get into that. Sorry, I'm having some technical stuff there. No problem. But we'll get going. And we'll look at this file. Where am I trying to go? Sorry, I heard my child yelling up from upstairs, and I didn't know if I was going to have to get up. Thankfully, my spouse is stepping away to do that. Okay, so the first thing to look at is the views file that actually I created. And the example that's on the Stripe documentation is this checkout session. So the idea is you have to create a session that you're going to be redirecting a user away from your site to a Stripe hosted site, and they will go to this session, fill in their details, and then after they're done, they will come back to your site. And there's two different paths that can come out of that you can see them represented here. There's a success case where they entered in all the details and they're good to go. And there's also a cancel case where they said, no, actually, I don't actually want to commit to that. So that's out there. And so we already have this code created here, and I wrapped up a lot of what they represented in their sample with what I call a gateway pattern. So there's a common pattern with this code that's to take an API and wrap it with a gateway. And the benefit of a gateway is to insulate you as a developer from changes that happen to your external provider's APIs. And so that could be like, well, what if Stripe changed the way they did some of these things and they need new options and you have this stuff called in multiple places? Essentially, it's an abstraction layer that can get used. So what I did is I have an API object which is creating the method and is taking a price. And then it will return a session ID, which is going to be returned to the browser. And that's where I ended because I haven't done any more from here. So what needs to happen is I need to write some code that will actually, via JavaScript, call this post method, and it will do a JSON request to get to provide the price and get the session, and then from that I will come back into this area, and we're going to use this code to take the session and do the redirection that's there. So I've got some of this done with test data. So if you aren't too familiar with Stripe, Stripe has both like test keys or a test environment and a live environment is how they split it. And so when you're in the Stripe account, you can kind of live in these two worlds. And so you start with the test environment, and then you can kind of copy stuff over to your live environment, which is where your production is supposed to be. So that way, if you want to test charging, you can use fake credit cards and do test charges to make sure that your app flow is actually working properly. So I've created the product and the prices in the test area, and I am ready to connect to that. I've in my local environment, I've plugged in the test keys and the test mode. So I can't really show you those because I'd have to go rotate my keys and stuff. But my environment is already configured to pull in or use the test mode stuff. And last time on the stream, we integrated DJ Stripe. So DJ Stripe is an interface to replicate Stripe model data or Stripe database data into Django tables. So there are models that I have locally in my environment that have the prices that I created in the Stripe side, and I did a sync command, so I have those prices available. In fact, we can look pretty quickly at that and see what that looks like. So let's jump over to the app, and we'll look at the Django admin and log in. I guess I got kicked out. So we're going to log in with the test account that I have that has all of the admin set up. And we'll go to the admin, which I'm calling Office in this app. And if we come down far enough, you see there's this DJ Stripe stuff. And one of those areas is prices. So I created my prices, and I gave them some kind of nicknames, which you can see here as monthly V1 and annual V1. And I'm going to use those as hooks to find the right price, because what the API from Stripe expects is the very specific price ID, this long thing here. And I'm not going to hard code that into my application because I want to be able to change that, but I do want some kind of reference that I can use. So we're going to work from the nickname feature of the model that's here so that we can reference the right thing and call up the right Stripe checkout mode from our app. All right, so I've kind of been struggling with like this flow of where to start with this, and I think the right area is maybe just to throw together a basic template that can have the buttons. It's not going to be pretty, but I want to confirm that I get the right data in there, create the right session, do the right redirect, and then I can spruce it up with all of the nice styling. So that's my plan. And right now I have this subscriptions index page, and this is going to be where I intend to send people when they are going from the trial state of the application for their account to a paid state. It's going to give them the options that they can select from, but this current template has nothing in it. So that's where we have to start, I think. So let's go to the subscriptions index and begin from the very basics. In fact, I'm going to pull in, we're going to steal from some of these other areas. We're going to steal from this template because it's going to, I need at least, I didn't even set up the very, very basics, which is extending from the base application that I've got. So we're going to pull that out, and I don't know that we actually want any of this stuff right now. I want to keep it as simple as I can, and we'll say, yeah, we won't even put in the title on the top. So it's going to be an empty template. And this is living at, let's go back to the site, and it's at, I don't even have a link to it yet, so we're just going to have to go directly to it. It's at subscriptions, I believe. Okay, so you can't really see it right now, but this template is the right place, and we're going to populate it here. And long term, I think I'm going to have some copy that says like it's, thank you for choosing School Desk, and now in order to continue on your usage of it, please select between one of two plans. And it's going to be big gigantic buttons, but for this evening's stream, really we just need two buttons. One button will be for the monthly and one button will be for the annual. So we're going to also need to populate those buttons with the actual data. There's going to be some JavaScript wiring in here. There's a bunch of things. So the other aspect of this that I have is the base template has a scripts block that I normally don't use because my application is mostly server rendered HTML. But when I need extra functionality, I can add this scripts block. And as you can see from this area down here, it's not even within a script tag. It's really just a space. So what we're going to do is in the documentation where they say you need to put in the script stuff from Stripe, that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to drop that in first, and that's where we'll start. And then we're going to need a script block. I don't know exactly what's going in it quite yet, but this is how we're going to get going. So now we've got a script block that is bringing in our JavaScript from Stripe, and we need to then add the necessary script block that's going to connect all the pieces together. So now we get down to their code here, and I'm going to copy it just for convenience, but we're going to change it pretty heavily, I think. Certainly at least going to reformat it. It didn't format well, so let's see if I can convince well, Vim got a little aggressive with that. That's not what I wanted either, Vim. Okay. Well, it's closer than it was, maybe. So we've got, so what is this code doing? It's right now it's fetching, it's doing an Ajax fetch or a JavaScript fetch, which is a way to do an Ajax call in modern JavaScript. I believe it's supported basically by all the browsers at this point. So I'm not going to deviate from that. My application is modern enough that I don't need to I don't need to have other ways like jQuery or something like that to get the necessary Ajax calls. And then we've got the stuff that's going in here. Man, Vim really messed up the formatting. I don't know what it was doing. It was pretty rough. So I'm trying to clean that up as I'm talking, but my brain's not really doing that well. So I'm just going to pause and do this quickly. Let's see, what else? Is it indented? Okay, that's probably good enough. So if we look at this, we can see that we're doing a fetch. The method is a post. We're sending it as an application JSON. It's a JSON request. So it's setting the content type header, which is important. And then as the body, it's taking a JavaScript object literal, and it's calling it price ID, and passing in a price ID from the function. So that's all well and good. I know already that from my view that I called it price underscore ID because I being a Python user, I like snake case. So we're going to need to change that attribute. I'll leave the price ID on the JavaScript side. JavaScript does tend to like camel case, so we'll use that. So that's good so far. The next thing to change is I'm not going to go to this URL. That's not a thing that exists. That's from their example. So let's delete that. And we're going to change it. And keep in mind that this chunk of code right now is a Django template. So we can do a URL. And this is the subscriptions. And it's the create checkout session is the name of the view, I think. And then we can close that off. So that should create, it's probably actually underscores. Create checkout session. So let's refresh the page and see if we got it. See if it blows up or not. And we can view the source to make sure that we're on the right track because there's nothing to see yet. Whoops, not page info. View the source. Come to the bottom and see, here we go. It's populated this with the proper URL that I expect. And then it's got our different information. But at this stage, nothing is calling this JavaScript function. So that's our next step. So let's return to the Stripe documentation and see what it says to do next. Because they kind of guide you along. And actually, there's also a full sample that we should probably bring up and have as a companion. Because some of these things are taken out of context. And there are other bits in here that we'll need along the way. Okay, so we've got our create checkout session. They're passing in this price ID. I don't know where they're getting that from. I think they'll use that for their example. What they have on the full example is that must have been like a placeholder because it's passing in the base price ID and the pro price ID in their example. So this is where we're going to be different. We're going to pass in, well, what are we going to do? They've structured this by saying in this code area, they've got us, this is all a little different from the way that I'll be doing this because they're calling a setup function, which is like a JavaScript function or a JavaScript API that's getting some JSON back and pulling out these parameters. And that's not the way that I'm going to do this. I'm not going to set up another view to pass in the data. I'll just render that in the server. So we're going to need the publishable key and then the different prices for the monthly and annual subscription before we can really get much further, I think. So let's give ourselves a bit of like just UI to work with. So we'll have a button that says monthly for now. And I guess it probably needs some identifier. So we'll say monthly button. I don't know. That should work. And then we'll have another button that says annual button. And we're going to wire those up with JavaScript so that they will do some Ajax stuff when they get clicked. Let's see if that was enough. Wow, they don't even, okay. I'm using Tailwind so it doesn't style any of those, so that's pretty weak. I at least need some like real buttons so that we can look at something substantial. So let's go to anywhere really, course detail, I don't know. Course detail. And let's pull a button from here. Surely I have a button somewhere accessible. No, those aren't buttons. Okay. Sorry, I don't remember where my buttons are. Those are nav, so that's not what I want. Okay, here's a button. So this will be our monthly. We'll add the ID, the monthly button. And we'll get rid of these two, and we'll do another one for annual. I mean, it probably doesn't really matter that I'm making these look nicer now, but I don't know. I couldn't just stare at blank text. Okay, so we've got two buttons. the goal, I don't know that we're going to get to all of it, but the goal would be to clicking this monthly should take us to the Stripe checkout page with the proper information. That's my hope. So we need at the on the actual page, we're going to need the prices that we care about. So we need I'm going to create a variable called monthly price. And I'm going to pull this, I'm going to set it as a string and pull it from the context. And it's going to be a string value. So I'm not like interpreting this in any weird way. This is not going to be data that can be injected. So there's no like security implications, which is something you need to be careful of when taking Python data and trying to make into JavaScript. Like if this was a JavaScript object, we'd have to be a lot more careful. But that's not the case. So we're going to do we'll say monthly price. In fact, we'll go ahead and use the actual ID, and then we'll do the same thing with annual. And this isn't going to work right away because we haven't put anything into the context here. So if I refresh this page, it shouldn't blow up, I don't think, but it should have like empty strings for those values. So letting it refresh, and then actually I've already got a page up here. So let's just refresh this, and you can see it's empty strings. So those need to be populated with those price underscore and then the long thing. So we need to go to our actual Django view and update that thing to pull out the right context. And that's going to involve quite a number of changes. So let's return to our views and come to this thing. And I'm going to pull this out as context. And we'll say, give it an empty dictionary. And MyPy is going to complain at me because I'm not using it and I haven't given it any type information, so it doesn't know what's in there. So it's going to be red and angry. So for the moment, I'll just give it some type to treat it as a dict of any. All right. The other thing we need to do, in fact, so that we can see, let's close the template for a minute. Now what we need to do is get the actual prices that are there. So where are the prices going to live and how am I going to retrieve them? Because I want this to be something that maps to data that I've like programmed into a database, we need to actually set some identifiers that I could do some lookups on. So the way that I did that, and what I showed from the admin, which I don't have up anymore, but you can imagine, was I created a description for each of the prices, and I gave them some identifiers. So I said monthly V1 and annual V1. And the idea behind that is that I want to be able to get out a price, but I want to give myself, I don't want to box myself in, so I'm adding a version identifier to it so that if I create, let's say I raise the prices in the future, find that more people are getting value out of it and they're okay with a price increase, or as much as one can be. And I raise the price from $4.99 to $6.99, I don't know, something like that. In that scenario, I would want to have a monthly V2, but I don't want to go delete the existing price that I had because that would be bad for long-term maintenance. So I need some place to store these identifiers of what is the active monthly price that I'm offering to people and what is the active annual price. The best way I can think to do that is with some settings. So I'm going to go to the project settings file and we're going to look at that. We're going to go down to the accounts app. So I'm trying to group these settings by the app that they're with. And so we'll say, what are we going to call this? We'll call this accounts, and we'll say monthly price. I think it's a nickname, but I don't know that I want to call it a nickname. And I don't want to say ID either because that's confusing. I'm struggling here because what I actually encountered when I was setting this up is that on the Stripe UI, they actually called it product description, but then in the model, it was called nickname, I believe, which is a little odd. But I guess I'll pick the one that matches with DJ Stripe, so to make the most sense of it. So let's look at the prices, and I'm going to click on this one. And down here somewhere, there it is, nickname. So we'll call it nickname. It'll at least stand out. And for now, I don't need to set this with an environment variable. It's really going to be a constant. So there's an argument to say that it doesn't actually belong in settings because it's not something that changes. But I'm okay with having a couple constants in there for the time being. And so we'll have monthly and annual. And this works okay because right now I set the test data to be like I want the production data to ultimately be. So I set it to the right prices. And Stripe gives you this option to copy from the test environment to the live environment. So the fact that I have the IDs matching up, these nicknames matching up, is actually a good thing because I know it will propagate over because I'm just going to copy over. So this is a safe thing to do whether I'm in my test environment or the real environment. So we've got these, and now we want to say, now we want to use these as part of our lookup. And I think what I want to do, I'm going to treat this that the prices need to be there, because if the prices aren't going to be there, it's not going to make any sense. It's not going to be something that can be shown in the checkout or on the subscriptions page. So we're going to do this. We're going to take, we'll have the what do I call it? The monthly price. And that's going to be a price objects get. And I'm going to filter on, or I'm going to do a get on nickname is equal to settings, account, monthly nickname, monthly price nickname. So we haven't brought in settings yet, so we can do that next. So we'll say from Django conf import settings. That takes care of that. And we also need the Stripe price model, and I actually don't know where that lives, so let's go find it. So DJ Stripe. I don't know if they put them all together. Maybe they do. Okay, looks like we can just import. Yeah, it's considered a core model, but they don't make us go down to that level of depth. So we can say from DJ Stripe .models import price. Did I do that right? Oh, okay. MyPy is complaining. Let's go to MyPy. And wait a minute. Yeah, this is DJ Stripe. Okay. We'll do DJ Stripe. So I've got Stripe and DJ Stripe. That's why I was getting confused for a minute, because I also had to use the Stripe API directly. So those two are going to exist in the MyPy file. So that tells it. So now we've got our price model. And now I should be able to come back to this page and look, I've got the price ID. That's great. And that worked because I have this price information synced locally. Now this is where there's going to be a problem is I think I have a subscription test, and I bet that test is blowing up right now. Probably need to go check it out. We'll do that in just a minute. So the other thing that I need is the annual price. So we'll do the annual price, and it's going to be the same exact pattern of objects get, and the nickname is equal to settings dot account. It's monthly. What's going on? Why is it not telling me? There we go. Accounts annual. and puts a comma there. Okay, so now we have our two pieces of data, and we can just check it out. We'll come over here again and refresh, and we've got the two prices in there. So we've done the proper lookups of the prices, and this is only made possible by the fact that I've synced this locally from DJ Stripe. If you're not using DJ Stripe, what would you have to do? You would have to use the actual Stripe API and do an HTTP request, and ask for, I think you could probably do the filtering to ask for either all your prices or ask for the ones that include the nicknames that you care about. And then you could populate it that way. But the benefit of DJ Stripe is it hooks into, there's a webhook that you actually connect Stripe to. So Stripe will, anytime you add a new price, it will send that data to the webhook and populate that in your database. So it's already there. So that gives you, in your application, you get the benefit of doing things just with the database directly, and there's no extra API calls. So it's going to be faster, most likely. And there's a trade-off of well, can it get out of sync? Yes, it can. So that's the challenge, but that's what we're working with here. So I found it to be worthwhile to have that stuff locally. So that's kind of nice. So we've got our two prices, and before I get too far off the reservation, we're going to go to the test views, and I believe I have a test view here, and I think, yeah, here it is. This is going to fail now because those gets are going to blow up. So it says there's not a price that matches this. So that's unfortunate. It really means that we have to create those two prices synthetically for the tests. So let's, before I get too far into this, let's make sure that the tests work. I think we can do that with a, here's where, so I'm using PyTest Django, which is great, but I'm also using Django Test Plus, which is also good, but the challenge with using test cases is that PyTest doesn't really like unit test style test cases. It's not easy to add in fixtures, and so that means that my ability to do, I would like to do a fixture here and then say auto use it, but I don't know if that'll work offhand. So I need to go look that up because I can never remember quite how that works. So PyTest and unit test is really what we're looking for, and see if there's a way that we can tell it to use a fixture. Let's see. Mixing PyTest fixtures into unit tests. Okay, here we go. So if we say use fixtures with this style with a mark, I think we can do that. So I think what I want to do is create a fixture. The fixture is going to be, well, it's not auto use, but it'll be a function scoped fixture, and it will create the two prices that we need, and then we will mix that into this subscriptions view because that's required data. So step one is to say, let's get PyTest in here because we need PyTest. And we'll say PyTest fixture and create prices. And it's not a method, so it doesn't need any attributes to it. So we need to create the two prices. So this is where we're gonna play with this. It might not work well initially. I don't think that DJ Stripe has any factories that we can use. Maybe they do. Actually, let's go confirm, just so I'm not wasting my time if they already do this. How do they test price? So they create it, or they're creating actual price objects. They're doing a bunch of extra stuff. All right, that's not quite what I'm looking for. Price. Let's see if they use the manager anywhere. Yeah, they create a price directly. And, ooh, I wonder if that Stripe product is what's going to get us. So we're going to try and hook into a price, and we might need all these parameters. I don't know which ones are going to require, but we'll experiment with it. So we'll do price objects create, and if this gets too nasty, I'm going to create a factory boy factory for price, even though it's not my model, because it would still be useful. But we'll start with the simple version. So we want nickname is equal to settings account monthly. And I want to see if I can get away with this, if this will work. So we've got, we need to bring in the price model. So that was from DJ Stripe models import price. And we also need Django settings from Django conf import settings. All right, so now we've got those. It's still going to fail though, because we haven't actually used the fixture. And I'm not going to set it to auto use for the whole module because not everything's going to need it. So, well, let's go ahead and make both of them. I'll probably regret that, but it's okay. So in theory, if this would work with no other information, then that's all we would need to do to get the test to work. So we would go in here and we say PyTest mark, what did the documentation say? Use fixtures, and give it the create prices fixture. So that should instruct PyTest to work with this unit test case and add in the prices. And it did good. And we know it worked because we're getting an integrity error. So that price create was failing. Kind of expected that something like that would happen. So we're going to just continue to we're going to poke at it. We'll do what we see in this example probably. And we'll just keep running the test until it works. So the next thing I want to do is put active equal true. And we'll run the test again. And we need a Stripe price. This is where it's going to get nasty. Now it's looking for a product, which means we need a product to put it. So we're going to have to create a product as well. So product objects create. I have no idea what goes into that. And you can see that they're using this sync from Stripe data, which I don't know what they're doing here. Which could be pulling from real data. Like, I don't know how they run their tests. I'd be shocked if that actually is syncing to Stripe in unit test. Maybe it is. That's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a product. So we'll say, and this is where it's definitely starting to feel like I'm going to need some factories here because this is silly. There should be no need to wire all this stuff together when this is what factories are designed for. But we'll start here until it gets unbearable. So then we'll come over to this and say product equal product. Nope, not produce. Product equal product. And find out what failure we hit next. So now we're getting the, oh wow. That might have been it. Because I would love to get away with not having to create more factories, especially for models that I don't own. like they're from the third-party package. So if I can do this, this would be amazing. All right, so we're missing, whoops. I think it said we're missing a price ID. We gotta have to pass in. We're getting past, all right, we're making progress. So we need an ID. And these are gonna be string style IDs. These are not Django primary key IDs. So we'll say ID equal price and then fake monthly, because it doesn't really matter. And ID price fake annual. I think that should be enough to get past those that next integrity error. Move on to the next one. Whoa, would you look at that? It passed. So we successfully created the two prices, created them pointing at the same product, which is what the reality would be, and it was able to get them in the view. So cool. That means our tester should be passing for this whole file. Oh, but they're not. What happened? Accounts, test views. What just ran that? The unauthenticated access blew up. Why? Integrity error. Oh man, so it's not actually really. So I think it's keeping the ID. Well, hold on, let's run it for this whole test case. This is the test case that blew up, so this one failed. So one of these two tests is failing. And I would expect the database would like roll back the object, but maybe that's not happening because the fixture, oh man, the fixture might be running outside of the transaction rollback stuff that is happening. So Django is not actually doing what we want. All right, well, let's do a different tact. Maybe we can't use a fixture. Django testing. I know the documentation is here, and this would be, let's see if it's in the basic setup documentation. Setup. So we might be able to do it from the setup and have it for each one. Or there's also probably a setup class. Setup. No, it's not going to be in here. How about advanced? Setup class. Wild goose chase. That's what this feels like. Setup. All right, we'll just try and do it at just the setup level, which is probably overkill. So ideally, you would only have to set up these prices for the whole test class, and everything else would be okay. So what I'm trying to do to see if this has the right behavior is to take these with the stuff we just did and put them inside of a setup method, which is unit test's way of doing pre-test setup. Again, it doesn't quite feel right, but what are you gonna do? So now I'm trying to run the same test class again. Okay, it worked. All right, that's fine. So we're not going to use PyTest fixtures after all. There were some side effects I didn't anticipate that it didn't actually seem to do the cleanup that I wanted. So let's get rid of the fixture stuff. So now we have a setup on our test case that will run for every unit test that goes in here. So all of the ones that need price stuff, they're going to get it. I didn't have to make a factory, and we got around the unique constraints because every time the test runs, it'll clean out the old prices. We won't run into that unique constraint that we just hit. Okay, so now I think we have the context. We even saw it when we looked at the source view. We've got our two prices in here. The next bit is going to be annoying, unfortunately, because I did not think to set up a publishable key. So I have to go get that stuff. We'll walk through that. We need to go to the settings, back to the settings, and there is I've got a DJ Stripe area, and what I need to add is the Stripe Publishable Key, and I need to get that from the environment, and I need to go get it from Stripe and all sorts of things. But before we do that, let's make sure we have the actual setting name that DJ Stripe wants, because I think that sometimes DJ Stripe will use that information. So I need to look at the settings that are here, if I can find them. There it is. Well, those are actual settings for DJ Stripe itself. Where's the publishable key? Here we go, I think. And if you're not super used to Stripe, what is the publishable key? The publishable key is there's different kinds of keys within Stripe. The secret keys are the ones that live on your server. They never get seen by the outside world. It's the way to confirm with Stripe that you really are the one in authority to make charges for this particular service. The publishable key is like it's a security layer, I think. Oh, it looks like they're taking them out. That's interesting for the public keys. So they're not going to be using them for their stuff. But when you use the Stripe JavaScript client, Stripe wants to make sure that the client that is talking to Stripe is that they can associate it with your account. It's publishable in that, like, you know, any user would be able to view source and see the publishable key. So it's not something that you have to protect to the same level as you do the secret keys, but it's another piece of configuration data that you need to have. Unfortunately, I didn't think to actually go get this data, so we have to do this right now. And so I'm going to have two. I'll have them just like the what you see here with the live key and the secret key, and I'm also going to have probably a bit of Boolean logic to make sure it picks the right one. In fact, I don't think I need to differentiate them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say Stripe, if I could spell it, Stripe public key, and we're going to say it's equal to either well, yeah, we'll pull them out. I'm just trying to think about the way I want to access this. Because we want to, the other thing to note here is this Stripe live mode. Live mode is what you toggle between, am I using the live key or am I using the test key? And so really what we're after ultimately is something like this. So we want to say Stripe live public key. And I'm not even sure that's the right name. Publishable might be a better name. I'm gonna, since DJ Stripe doesn't seem to care, I'm gonna take what Stripe actually calls it. If they end up calling it a public key, which I'm gonna look at in a minute, then I'm gonna use that name. But if not, I'm gonna use this name here because the public is shorter. So we're gonna say if it's Stripe live Stripe mode, then we're gonna use the real live public key. otherwise we're going to pull from the Stripe test public key. That's what we're after. So now is the point at which I need to, unfortunately, like turn off my display for a minute and go to Stripe. So I'll try and talk you through what I'm doing. So I got to go into super secret mode. Sorry about that. Didn't anticipate that, or didn't really think that through before I started. And hopefully it doesn't prompt me to log in and all that other nonsense. So I'm looking at the dashboard. There's a toggle on the side that says to switch to test data, and that's what I'm going to do. And so now I'm on looking at the test mode, and there's a developers tab on the side, and it has different API keys and webhooks and events and logs. I'm just talking you through the UI as we're going through this. I clicked on API keys, and it says right there in full readable text, publishable key. I don't think anything is sensitive on here, but I don't feel super comfortable showing this, so I'm going to leave it as is. So what I need to do is then go into, so what you're not seeing is I'm going to change it to, instead of public, I'm going to change it to publishable, like I suspected it was actually called. So they don't actually call it a public key, it's a publishable key. And I'm looking out for typos that I've got here. So we're going to have this Stripe Publishable Key as the settings. It's going to be based on an environment variable. And I guess I can bring this up for a minute. I'm not actually looking at anything sensitive at the moment. So we've got these, I've changed the variable names a little bit, and now we're going to go to the example, environment example, and the stuff we need to add is this stuff again, but we're going to change it now to, instead of secret, it's going to be publishable, and we're going to get rid of the secret there. And this will be, I think it can be the same. I think they want, it's probably not going to be SK, it's probably going to be PK. Okay, let me go back to Stripe for a second. It's PK. So I'm going to, knowing that it's PK, I'm going to update the example to say PK. And then I'm going to go into the actual environment file where I have my real keys, and that's where I can't show you. And I'm going to add the Stripe test publishable key, and it's going to be equal to the PK test. And it's just this big long string. That's the part that I can't show you. So that's, or I mean, I could show you that, but I can't show you my secret keys, which are sitting right above it. So I've done that, and we're going to get out of here and look at, make sure I'm on a different file for sure before I bring this back up. Okay, so that should be good. So sorry about that. That's just the reality of working with secrets in a streaming session. And it looks like I have really done something. Oh, that's for different. That's the webhook. So the other thing that we need to do then is put the publishable key into the context. And so I'm going to say publishable key, or actually let's give it the full name, Stripe Publishable Key. And then we want the value, which is the Stripe Publishable Key. Okay. So this should be good to go. If we go back to the template now, let's close this. Let's go to the template. And we're going to add the Stripe Publishable Key. It's going to be equal to the Stripe Publishable Key. And if I wire this all together, we should see this when we look back at it crashed because I didn't have it set at the time. We look back at the view source. And refresh this page. So here it is. Like I said, it's just a big long value. And we need it because we're about to invoke the Stripe client. And that's the important part. So that sets us up there, which is good. And I'm pretty confident that we did it correctly. I don't know that there's some aspects of this that I don't really like. The fact that we kind of have two, and that they're using an if in the settings is not so nice. I would love to avoid that, but sort of unavoidable with the way that Stripe does this. Especially if I want to be able to test my live or test settings at the time, I'd have to swap out a bunch of extra information. So I'm going to leave it as this, as is written here. And that's just going to be the way of it. So I think we're ready to return to the tutorial. So let's see what they're doing. They're saying get element by ID checkout. What do they have listed as checkout? So that's just their button. Okay. And they are attaching to it a click handler. And inside that click handler is calling the checkout session. And then this is the important part of this. It's calling a redirect to checkout. That's the important part. I don't know about the handle result. I don't know why that really matters. Let's see if we can find out. Handle fetch result is what they renamed it in their example. Handle fetch result or handle result. Oh, okay. So if there are any errors, they're showing an error page. So they set this up twice for two different buttons, basically. So let's take this chunk of code. We have all of this. This is pretty close to actually what we want. And we're going to come down to the script area again. We're going to paste in the code. And now we have the Stripe. It's very close to what I actually called it, Stripe Publishable Key. And we need to connect the button. So I'm just gonna focus on the monthly button for now. And so we'll say monthly button. And add event listener, it's gonna click, and then we'll give it the monthly price ID, which is up there. And so that's going to call, so the monthly price is going to go into this checkout session function, which is going to call our post endpoint and pass in the results. And then it's going to return that as the data. And that data is going to come into this callback function, which is the then, which will call into Stripe. And this is the first time we're actually interacting with Stripe. So it's calling to Stripe to call this redirect to checkout, and it's passing in the session ID, which Stripe expects, and the actual session ID that we're returning. So I need to make sure that, I don't know that I called it session ID in the same way in my endpoint. I don't think I did actually. Let's go to the views. think I called it session underscore ID. Yeah. So that's where it needs to vary. So I'm calling mine session underscore ID. And then hopefully that would all do everything that we expect. We might be ready to try it. Don't actually know. Yeah, let's see how it goes. The worst that could happen is that it's broken, right? So we're gonna refresh the page. I'm gonna bring up the console because there's a good chance this could not work. And they're giving us a warning that says, you can't use Stripe over HTTP normally, but so we're in test mode, so that's okay. But they're telling us that if we want to do this for real, you must do it over a secure connection, which I totally get and I totally appreciate. I'm going to click this and see what happens. Oh, interesting. So we did a post to the endpoint, but the post did not, it got a 403. And it probably got a 403 because I think I have CSRF protections on there. So we posted to an endpoint without the CSRF token. Let's see what we got back as a response. Yeah. So there's no CSRF token in the request. And it fails. Not too surprising. So we need to, when we do the post with the fetch, we can pass in an extra header. And the header is, I think it's called X CSRF token. Django X CSRF token. There it is. X CSRF token. So we're doing a fetch here. We can pass that in, and the value, we can get the CSRF token. And I don't know if we need to call it this style or if we need to call it as a slightly different way. So let's save this and look at the source again, see how it came out. No, that did it as a hidden input, which is totally wrong. So I can never remember which one is which. So if you call it with %, it does it as a hidden input, but if you call it like a variable, it will should just do the value itself. Yeah, there it is. So I'm hoping now that we will get the right CSRF call in there and our request to create a session won't blow up in our faces. We're done with the price stuff, and let's refresh the page and hide that, clear that. So now we're ready to go. I mean, we did have the satisfaction of knowing that we clicked it and it did kick off the right of chain of JavaScript stuff, so that's all good. Now I'm clicking it again, and it posted. It's coming back. Ooh. So much is happening. Awesome. Look at that. It worked. It took a little while. And we got some interesting warnings and such here. And certain requests that didn't work. I don't really know. Content security policy. Ooh, interesting. I might need to script source. I don't know. I don't know what all some of these things are. Onload WFF. I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's my own extensions or what. All right. Well, this is cool though. You guys check it out. Like this is where I want people to land. I don't want it, I would rather it not take that long, so I probably need some kind of loading spinner or something like that, but that's a refinement we can make. But look at what's here. It has school desk, and that's redirecting back to the site. I think that I have that as the cancel URL, maybe. I've got it hard-coded for now. So the cancel URL is coming back just to the site. So that's the back button. And I need to change the product name clearly, because subscribe to subscription sounds terrible, but I would never have discovered that unless we got to this page, so that's good. Looks like I need to pre-populate the email field. So that's something that we need to do. So I'm going to add a to-do here. Pre-populate email field. Okay, and this is where they would then enter their card information, enter all this stuff. I like this, right? It's pretty simple. Shows everything that I need. I'm not actually going to fill this out now because we're not actually configured to do the rest of this flow. I was really just trying to get to this stage of, can I even get to this page? And I think that we've confirmed that we can. All right, so we've been going about an hour and we've reached this successful state. So I don't feel like I'm going to poke that anymore. I'm going to call it a night probably here. My plan over the next few weeks is to get this whole process flowing, get everything going, do all the way end to end, because collecting payment is just one step. So after the payment is collected, then I have to need to go back into my system and update certain account statuses. And I don't know whether I want to do that from webhooks, because I've got webhooks configured. And so after somebody makes their payment, Stripe is going to send a webhook to the site. So I could either react there, or it's possible also to react on the success URL. I don't know if I want to do that either. I'm not really sure. And I need to do some research on that. But that's the plan, is to collect payment and then move on in the process to actually configuring the user's account to be an actual subscriber and move them out of the trialing state. So that's my goal. Hopefully this was informative to you. It's a combination of like doing Django stuff and template stuff and also integrating with this Stripe hosted offering. And I think it's got a lot of promise to it. I've got some tweaks I need to make, but it's heading in the right direction. So with that, I'll sign off. Thank you very much for joining in, and I'll see you next time. Take care.